Hey guys, tonight we drift far beyond the edge of maps and memory into a time before names, before land, before the sky itself. You float weightless in a vast, endless sea. There is no sun, no moon, not even darkness, just the gentle pulsing rhythm of two primordial beings. Apsu, the fresh waters below, and Tiamat, the salty sea above, swirl together in an eternal embrace. No need for clocks here, the only ticking is the slow heartbeat of eternity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let us know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the hum of potential in the water around you, like the universe is taking a deep breath. These aren't gods with lightning bolts or shiny temples, not yet. These are formless forces, raw and gentle in their age-old rhythm. Tiamat is enormous, ancient, and strangely soothing, like a prehistoric lullaby that never quite ends. Apsu is more impatient. Still waters may run deep, but he's itching for something to happen. And then it does. From their union, strange stirrings bubble to life. The first gods, Lamu and Lahamu, float like foam on the sea. They're not particularly ambitious at first, just mildly curious. Think of toddlers with divine powers and no supervision. Historians still argue whether this pair had distinct personalities or were simply cosmic archetypes, kind of like those twins from every sci-fi movie who talk in unison. Soon come Ansha and Kisha, slightly more refined, if by refined you mean they occasionally remember not to yell across the void. The generations unfold, each one more chaotic and loud than the last. And poor Apsu. He's just trying to nap in peace. You drifting through this primordial scene sense the tension thickening. The young gods aren't malicious, they're just noisy. They create ripples, frequencies. Their divine chattering shakes the waters. Maybe it's laughter, or maybe it's the first argument in the cosmos. Either way, Apsu's frown deepens. Tiamat, though she listens, she always listens. Here's a little-known tidbit. Some fringe scholars believe Tiamat once whispered names into these baby gods' ears, names so powerful the universe flinched into structure. Not that we have receipts, of course, but it would explain why the youngest gods got so confident. You glide past a godlet bubbling out of the sea like a soap bubble giggling with thunder. Creation has begun not with a bang, but a squabble. And in the center of it all, Tiamat watches, immense and silent, her belly full of possibilities. Somewhere deep inside her, you feel something stirring, not rage yet. But the first ache of it, word count 105D7, you hover now in the warm swaying current between generations. The earliest gods have grown louder, bolder, and frankly, a little obnoxious. You'd think immortals might take a breather now and then, but no, they're constantly experimenting, shouting to hear their echoes, sparking tiny firestorms just to see what will happen. It's like a divine frat house, and the cosmic floorboards are starting to creak. Apsu has had enough. He drifts through the waters like an old man trying to meditate while someone plays the drums upstairs. You can almost hear his sigh ripple through the currents. His once tranquil domain is now a riot of sound and energy. He doesn't understand these new beings. They're noisy, restless, and constantly reshaping the waters with their exuberance. He peers at them from the deep, probably thinking, in my day, we respected silence. The children, Anuia and the others, don't notice his growing frustration. They're too busy naming constellations, inventing storms, and possibly racing comets for fun. One of them, Ea, is especially clever. He's the kind of cosmic trickster who would hotwire a black hole just to see what happens. Still beneath the comedy of creation, you can feel it, the mounting tension like static before a storm. Apsu begins muttering dark plans into the deep. Maybe he doesn't want to erase them exactly, just quiet them permanently. You float near his thoughts, and they're colder than the deep sea trench he formed last Tuesday. Meanwhile, Tiamat remains silent. Her silence is not passive, it's heavy like the pause between thunderclaps. You wonder what she's thinking as Apsu complains, threatens, and schemes. Historians still debate whether she truly agreed with Apsu's plan, or if she only listened out of love. And then something unexpected happens. The younger gods sense Apsu's growing hostility, not clearly, more like a vague, bad dream. They gather, whisper, and tremble for the first time. Among them, Ea begins to plot. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here's a fringe theory for your sleepy brain to chew on. Some texts suggest Tiamat had tried to calm Apsu with a lullaby, a kind of primordial melody only sea goddesses know. But he wouldn't hear it. The idea of quiet by music didn't sit right with a god who wanted silence by force. You drift between the two ancient parents, Apsu growing sharp, Tiamat staying still. Their children sparkle above them, clueless and incandescent. And through the rising waves of discontent, the sea itself begins to churn. You linger now in the thickening current between patience and fury. Apsu no longer whispers his plan, he announces it, his voice curling through the waters like a slow-boiling tide. The children of the deep will be silenced, he declares, not scolded, not sent to bed early, eliminated. It's a lot even for a god. You swirl near the cavern of his thoughts as he consults his vizier, Mummu. Now, Mummu isn't exactly a villain. He's more like that co-worker who nods at every bad idea during a meeting just to wrap it up faster. Historians still argue whether Mummu truly supported Apsu's plan or was simply riding the wave of authority. Either way, he's not handing out peace treaties. Together they shape a plan, a final dreamless quiet, a cosmic reset, if you will. Step 1, sneak into the divine nursery. Step 2, hit snooze forever. But plans have a funny way of leaking, especially in a universe made entirely of fluid. Ea, one of the younger and more intuitive gods, catches a shimmer of the scheme in the currents. It's not a full eavesdrop, more like when someone across the house says your name and you know. He doesn't panic. He thinks, here's your historical nugget. For tonight, the earliest Mesopotamian clay tablets describing this myth actually suggest that Ea wasn't just clever, he was a master of incantations, a real magical engineer, not the guy waving sparkly wands. The guy who invents wands and makes you forget your own name. So Ea does what all smart, slightly rebellious children do. He strikes first. You follow him into the hidden chamber where Apsu slumbers his rage, coiled like a sleeping serpent. Ea chants softly. The water thickens. Time slows. Then silence. With a whisper, Apsu is undone. The fresh waters are stilled, and Mummu, faithful or foolish, is captured, bound in a knot of magic that no tide can loosen. The young gods cheer their laughter, echoing louder than ever. You, however, float in the aftershock of it, because now something shifts. Tiamat, who had endured so much, who had held silence as her sanctuary, knows. Her mate is gone. Her consort extinguished like a flickering flame beneath the sea. The grief isn't loud, it's glacial, grinding through the depths with unbearable weight. Here's a quirky little thought. Some ancient fragments suggest that Tiamat wept backwards, that her tears flowed inward, forming caverns of salt inside her vast body. Whether poetic or literal, you can feel those hollow spaces forming now. She does not scream, not yet, but she begins to stir. You drift closer now to the great salt swell of Tiamat, and you can feel it. The ancient sea mother has begun to move. Slowly, like the turning of a forgotten tide, there is no wail, no storm, just a stillness so deep it feels louder than thunder. The younger gods are still celebrating, lighting up the cosmic sea with reckless delight. E sits smugly on his new throne, Mummu coiled at his feet, like a regret turned into a paperweight. The rebellion, it seems, is complete. But beneath them, Tiamat does not sleep. She mourns. And in her mourning, something begins to harden. Where once she was vast and nurturing, she is now dense, tightening with purpose.
Have you ever watched water freeze in reverse? That's what it feels like. Rage calcifying beneath grief. She begins to create, not in the soft, watery way she once did, but with teeth and fire and claws. Deep in her womb of brine she births monsters, 11 of them, not nice ones. These aren't your garden variety chaos critters. We're talking horned vipers with human heads, walking fish with shrieking wings, and a lion dragon so absurdly proportioned it looks like a doodle drawn during a bad day in mythology school. Each one she shapes with more precision, more vengeance. These are not mere children, these are weapons. Historians still debate whether Tiamat crafted these beings herself or summoned them from older chaos fragments of realities before this one. Some suggest they were sleeping inside her all along, waiting for the silence to crack. A fun detail: some Babylonian tablets give each monster a name and role.
There's the storm demon, the raging serpent, and even a mad dog god. You get the feeling the ancient scribes were equal parts terrified and weirdly proud of this menagerie. And then comes the crown jewel of her fury, Kingu. Kingu isn't just a muscle-bound monster, he's disappointing. Think of him like that moody new boyfriend who shows up at family dinner and gets handed the keys to the kingdom for no reason. Still, Tiamat sees in him a kind of raw potential, or maybe just someone to carry her rage without asking too many questions. She places the Tablet of Destiny as a divine cheat code on Kingu's chest. It's not just symbolic. Whoever holds the tablet supposedly gets to dictate fate itself. Reality bends. Outcomes are locked in. Even traffic gods have to obey. You follow her gaze now as she looks over her new army. 11 creatures of chaos and one sullen consort. Her heart is no longer soft. It's a forge. And she is no longer the mother of all things. She is the monster that monsters fear. You float just above the ripple where fear begins. The younger gods, so recently smug, begin to feel it and ache in the current, like the moment before a tsunami. They don't know yet what's coming, but they know something isn't right. Word travels fast in the celestial halls. Tiamat is stirring. She's angry. She has creatures. You hover near their debates, which sound less like a war council and more like a divine panic room filled with toddlers holding thunderbolts. The gods gather in a circle that isn't quite a circle because geometry wasn't invented yet. They shout, argue, maybe cry a little. One tries to nominate themselves as Supreme Peace Ambassador, but mostly they're stalling, because facing Tiamat, that's like charging into a volcano armed with a scented candle, And here's your historical moment of the night. The Council of the Gods is a recurring motif in Mesopotamian myth. These divine assemblies weren't just plot devices, they reflected actual royal councils in Babylonian courts, where kings would consult high priests and omens before acting. So yes, even gods needed committees. Terrifying. Among the gods, Anu, the sky deity and head of the older generation, tries to be brave. He steps forward, cloak fluttering in invisible winds, and boldly volunteers to confront Tiamat. You follow him as he soars toward her watery fortress. But when he gets close enough to feel the pressure of her presence, like the ocean pressing on your chest, he panics. He doesn't even throw a single lightning bolt. He turns around mid-flight with a nope so powerful entire constellations seem to flinch. Historians still argue whether this retreat was cowardice or strategic delegation. Either way, he's out. Back in the council, the silence is deafening. Eyes shift toward Ea, the clever one, remember, but even he hesitates. What worked against Apsu won't work here. This isn't a sleepy old patriarch. This is a mother betrayed. And that's when someone very unexpected speaks up. A younger god, a relatively untested one, Marduk. He's got that mix of calm confidence and quiet flair. The type who would show up to a volcano in sunglasses and ask for a glass of water. He clears his throat and says he'll do it. He'll face Tiamat. He'll fight the mother of monsters. But there's a catch. Marduk wants a contract. He'll take on this cosmic suicide mission if the gods agree unanimously to make him their supreme ruler afterward, not just a thank you banquet, full undisputed celestial kingship. You can almost hear the divine jaws drop. It's bold, brazen, kind of bratty, and it works. They agree reluctantly, maybe because they have no better option, maybe because Marduk's charisma has gravity, but mostly because they're terrified. And so the contract is written on clay in cuneiform, because even in myth paperwork matters. You watch now as the gods gather solemnly, forming a divine circle, with enough hesitation to suggest they'd rather be anywhere else. Each one steps forward one by one and lays a token of agreement at Marduk's feet, bundles of power promises and cosmic privileges. The clay tablet of contract is inscribed, stamped, sealed with ancient symbols and heavenly eyebrows raised. Marduk! Oh, he's ready. But he doesn't rush, no dramatic lightning charge just yet. First, he prepares in a hidden chamber outside of time. Yeah, time hasn't quite been invented yet, but this place feels like it's always 3 a.m. He begins crafting weapons, not swords in the usual sense. These are elemental constructs. Think less sharpened metal, more concepts turned deadly. He forges a net woven of winds capable of snaring even the formless. He conjures tempests, sandstorms, and avalanche breaths, all folded neatly into jars and stored like apocalyptic jam. And then the showstopper, a bow whose string hums like a storm before it starts, and an arrow tipped with cosmic fire. Here's a delicious historical aside for you. In ancient Mesopotamian art, Marduk is sometimes shown with a spade-like weapon called the maru, which some scholars interpret as a stylized lightning bolt or ceremonial shovel. Either way, he's not bringing a butter knife to a sea monster duel. The gods, watching from a distance, murmur. Some are hopeful, others are already planning post-battle resumes. But Marduk's not concerned with their chatter. He's rehearsing spells, pacing in the void like a warrior poet, with anxiety and destiny knotted in his shoulders. Now here's something fringe scholars love to debate. Did Marduk truly believe he could win? Or was he bluffing, rolling dice with fate, and hoping that charisma could beat chaos, you floating beside him unseen feel the dual pulse in his chest, confidence and a flicker of fear. But he doesn't flinch. Instead, he pulls a secret weapon from behind his back, the Imhulu wind, a name that sounds like a sneeze but blows like a hurricane with a degree in jiu-jitsu. This wind, legend says, is more than air. It's will. His will. It whispers across the still waters, reaching Tiamat's distant stronghold like a challenge wrapped in storm scent. She feels it. Far off in the deep, Tiamat lifts her head. Her monsters hiss. Kingu tightens his grip on the tablet of destinies, though he's still not totally sure which button does what. And you feel the fabric of the universe twitch, because now everything's moving. You follow the currents now as they twist toward the great salt bastion where Tiamat broods. The waters around her are thick with power like molasses spun from storm clouds. Her 11 creatures circle her restlessly, each a nightmare stitched together from impossible thoughts. You recognize them now. There's the horned serpent with bronze feathers, the viper lion whose roar bruises the air, the scorpion man who never blinks. They don't just guard her, they orbit her gravitational as fear itself. And in the heart of it all stands Kingu. He is not impressive, at least not in the way you'd expect a divine general to be. He's tall, sure, and the Tablet of Destinies does give him a bit of glow-up, but he has that look. That's slightly awkward. I wasn't expecting this promotion look. He keeps glancing at Tiamat like he's waiting for instructions she hasn't given. You feel it. He's been chosen not for strength, but for loyalty, and that can be a tricky currency when the sky starts to break. Still with the tablet strapped to his chest, Kingu radiates authority, and that's what matters for now. The monsters obey him more or less because he holds the contract of fate. Even if he doesn't know how to read it upside down. Here's a lesser-known nugget for your mythological trivia collection. Some cuneiform sources suggest Kingu was originally Tiamat's son before becoming her consort. Awkward, right? Historians still debate whether this is symbolic or just the Mesopotamian version of "it's complicated." You drift closer and listen to the chants echoing from her camp. The monsters speak in frequencies that make your ears tingle low and high at once. They're not just preparing for battle, they're tuning the universe to war. Tiamat rises slowly, her massive form coiling like 1,000 miles of tidal fury. She does not shout. Her eyes alone speak volumes, and every drop of her oceanic presence says, "Come." And across the void, Marduk hears her. He moves finally with all the gods watching. Cloak billowing like thunderclouds, he doesn't strut, he glides. Imhulu at his back, net at his hip, bow slung across his shoulders. He doesn't flinch when the horizon goes dark. Tiamat's army is coming. You feel it before you see it. A rolling tide of chaos, creatures surging from her lair like the nightmares of a drowned world. Kingu leads them, eyes, glowing claws raised, probably trying to remember the battle plan. And Marduk, he just smiles, steps into the silence and speaks, "Let fate be decided by battle." You feel it now, the stillness before the cosmos holds its breath. Marduk floats alone, calm and sharp as a blade of starlight, while a monstrous tide boils toward him. The 11 beasts of Tiamat are not marching, they churn, they twist the sea with every limb, every claw, every thunderous wing beat. And at their front, Kingu raises the Tablet of Destinies like a shield. It's glowing now, overcompensating for his lack of actual strategy. Marduk doesn't draw his weapons yet. He waits, watching, calculating, and from the rim of heaven the gods lean in. They've cast their lot, inked the clay, and now they can only witness. Let's pause for a charming historical quirk. Ancient Babylonian astronomers often mapped constellations onto myths like this one. Some scholars believe the dragon constellation Tiamat was later merged with Hydra or Draco, so when you look up at the writhing star snake above you might just be tracing the spine of the Sea Mother herself. But back to the battlefield. As the beasts charge, Marduk moves, not with violence but with command. He unleashes the wind. Imholu roars out from his chest, not as a gust, but as a living force. The front ranks of chaos are knocked sideways. Serpent wings tangle flame lions stagger. The net follows, shimmering with divine threadwork. It expands like the galaxy, stretching, and snags 3 monsters mid-charge. Screaming, twisting, they vanish into wind-woven silence. You hover, just behind Marduk's shoulder, watching his face. Calm, focused, maybe even bored. He mutters an incantation under his breath, something wet, sharp, and older than stars, and a storm cloud arrow shoots from his bow, striking the viper lion directly in its molten eye. Boom, fire and fur. Kingu panics, his monsters falter. He waves the tablet of destinies like a stressed manager flipping through a broken user manual. The army starts to scatter. Tiamat, still at the rear, watches, and now finally she begins to move. Tiamat doesn't charge. She emerges, like a moon rising but sideways and angry. Her body uncoils from the deep miles, long luminous with cosmic grief. The ocean parts as her eyes find Marduk, and Marduk, he nods, because this was always the real fight. Historians still argue whether this myth was a metaphor for Babylon's rise to power, with Marduk representing imperial order and Tiamat the unruly city-states. But in this moment, none of that matters. Only 2 forces remain: the god of order and the mother of everything wild. The space between them is vast, and yet it vibrates with tension like the gap between lightning and thunder. You drift closer, weightless, a silent witness to the moment the world balances on a breath. Marduk stands tall, wind churning behind him. Tiamat rises her form, blotting out the stars. She is not merely a dragon, she is sea, sky, storm, and scream compressed into one colossal, coiled presence. And finally, she speaks. Not in words you'd recognize. Her voice is the crash of waves in reverse, the hiss of steam in ancient caves, the groan of tectonic plates settling into silence. But you understand her meaning. She is not here for justice, not even revenge. She is here because everything she ever was has been taken from her. And now she answers with flame. She exhales a jet of salt fire that boils the air itself. Marduk's net catches part of it, but not all. You feel the heat graze your skin even from this dreamlike distance. He spins through it, graceful as smoke summoning winds to carry him above. Tiamat lunges, her body undulates like an entire sea, coming to crush a single rock. Her mouth opens inside it, galaxies spin teeth like mountains. Marduk doesn't retreat. He dives forward, hurling nets, hurling winds, whispering words that curve space like a spiral staircase. Here's your historical tidbit. This duel wasn't just entertainment for ancient readers, it was cosmic legitimacy. Babylon's priests reenacted parts of this myth during the Akitu festival, where kings were symbolically reborn through order's victory over chaos. So yes, somewhere out there, a guy in royal robes once pantomimed slaying a sea monster while being sprinkled with holy water and possibly stage fright. Back in the myth, Marduk lashes out with his bow, shooting another divine arrow, this one tipped with silence. It lands just above Tiamat's eye, stunning her. She falters, and here's a quirky footnote from some less popular texts. They claim Marduk paused mid-battle to talk to her. Not mockingly, almost gently. Some scholars read this as pity. Others a warning. Maybe even an apology wrapped in thunder. But words don't change what comes next. Tiamat gathers herself into a cyclone of flesh and fury. Her tail becomes a tidal wave, her claws spark against the stars. Marduk breathes once, then charges, and now the real end begins. You ride the wind, now streaking alongside Marduk, as he rushes headlong into the storm of scales and flame. This isn't just combat, it's creation in collision. Every movement births an echo, every strike leaves an imprint on the still-forming cosmos. Tiamat bellows and her breath splits the void. Not metaphorically. You actually see a tear in reality fluttering behind her jaws, a yawning rift of raw chaos that sings with the screams of unborn things. Lovely. Marduk doesn't blink. He unfurls the net, not just a tangle of rope, but a trap woven from will. It stretches around her, expanding until it wraps the horizon like a constellation trying to hold its breath. She thrashes, crashes, turns inside out, nothing escapes. And then Marduk speaks a word. It's not in Sumerian. It's not even in language. It's a sound made of decision. And suddenly the winds snap into place. The Imhulu storm wind of judgment barrels down Tiamat's throat. Before she can close her jaws, she chokes. This isn't a dramatic pause, it's cosmic choking. Imagine the sea itself trying to swallow a lightning bolt and realizing it chews back. Tiamat's body convulses. You feel the tremor rattle the unborn stars. Marduk draws his blade, not a simple sword. This is the saber of destiny, said to be forged from the spine of the first word ever spoken. It hums with possibility, glowing like moonlight filtered through volcanic ash. He lifts it high, and Tiamat opens her eyes, vast liquid mirrors of the old world. And then he strikes. The blade pierces her clean, deep absolute, right through the heart if sea goddesses have heart. She howls a sound that turns your bones to salt. Her body buckles, coils, slackening wings, folding like broken sails. You wait for blood, but what spills isn't blood, it's sky. Tiamat's form begins to unravel into light, into water, into structure. Her defeat isn't destruction, it's transformation. And here's the philosophical twist. Scholars have long argued whether this was mercy or cruelty. Did Marduk kill her or elevate her, turning her into the very world that would outlive her rage? Because as her vast body collapses, it does not vanish. Marduk begins to shape it. You drift in stunned silence now as Tiamat's vast defeated form floats like a forgotten sky whale, stretching from one edge of reality to the other. But this isn't aftermath. It's blueprint. Marduk doesn't pause to celebrate. No fist-pumping, no divine tick-tock. Instead, he gets to work. He surveys the universe like an architect with a demolition permit and a cosmic chisel. Then he reaches for her immense body, not with reverence, but with intent. The act feels surgical, sacred, slightly unsettling. First, he slices her lengthwise top to bottom. Ever tried halving an ocean? That's essentially what he's doing. From one half, he stretches a firmament, a great celestial dome that becomes the sky. And the other half, he flattens it into a base, a platform. The earth, congratulations. You're currently standing or sleeping on the flattened remains of a primordial goddess. Your historical dose for this chapter, the Babylonian term for this celestial ceiling was rakia, which some believe influenced later Hebrew cosmology. It wasn't just decorative, it was thought to hold back chaotic waters above the heavens, a literal firm roof between order and madness. Makes your dry ceiling feel a bit more dramatic, doesn't it? Back in the myth, Marduk doesn't stop at floor and ceiling. Oh no, he scoops up chunks of Tiamat's spine, lays them into mountain ranges. Her teeth ground into rock. Her eyes become the fountains that feed the Tigris and Euphrates. And her tail, becomes the arc of the Milky Way. Fringe scholars have pointed out that the Babylonian view of creation was distinctly anatomical. The world was not summoned from a void, but built from a body with all the mess and intimacy that implies. Creation wasn't magic, it was surgery. As you float above it all, you start to notice the odd beauty of it. There's something poetic about a slain monster becoming the cradle of life, the bones of chaos laid into the geometry of peace, and the other gods they watch in awe, maybe even fear. Because Marduk isn't just a warrior now, he's a cosmic engineer, an interior designer of existence. And the universe its rivers winds, soils clouds is no longer wild, it is his. Now you float between earth and sky, balanced on the invisible axis Marduk has just carved from chaos. Tiamat's body stretches beneath you, no longer monstrous, but monumental. Every cloud above you is her breath, every stone underfoot a piece of her spine. Welcome to the universe now under new management. Marduk isn't finished. He looks out over his newly ordered realm and realizes all this structure needs rules, boundaries, timetables, which is how you find yourself watching him invent something both glorious and awful, the calendar. He hangs the moon in the sky, carved from Tiamat's lower jaw, don't ask how, and sets it on a soft silver orbit. Then he plucks bright shards from the leftover chaos, flings them into the sky, and calls them stars. Some he appoints as night guardians, others as signposts for divine appointments. And finally he lights the greatest torch of all, the sun, blazing and precise. Here's your factual nugget of the night. Babylonian astronomers were obsessed with celestial patterns. They mapped moon phases, predicted eclipses, and even tracked Venus with unnerving accuracy. Some historians say this part of the myth explains not just the heavens but the origin of timekeeping itself. Back in the myth, Marduk assigns the sun to mark days, the moon for months, and the stars for seasons. He doesn't just build a world, you realize he builds routine, the first cosmic schedule, the first celestial spreadsheet, and this surprisingly is where things get weirdly bureaucratic. He starts handing out jobs to the other gods. You'll control rain, you're in charge of farming rituals, and you stop napping. You're now the official measurer of goat shadows. Okay, maybe not that last one, but honestly, would it surprise you, historians still argue, whether this redistribution of power was Marduk's way of stabilizing divine society or just really efficient micromanagement? Either way, you get the sense the gods aren't thrilled about their new task lists, but after what he just did to Tiamat, they're not exactly rushing to complain. And here's a quirky little tidbit. There's evidence that temples in ancient Babylon assigned daily duties to priests based on the positions of stars, literally acting out Marduk's cosmic scheduling in real time. Talk about work-life myth balance. You glance around the new world. It is ordered, yes, beautiful even, but you feel it, the faint tremble beneath the earth, a pulse of something older. Tiamat may be gone, but she is not erased. She's everywhere. And as Marduk gazes over his creation, a shadow flickers across his face. Because something is missing. You float now in the hush that follows grandeur. The sky gleams with measured stars, the seas murmur against land newly risen from chaos, and yet there's a hollow in the order. Marduk feels it too. His universe is majestic but empty. The gods have been assigned their cosmic chores. The rivers are flowing, the calendar ticks neatly forward, and no one is screaming about scorpion men anymore. And yet Marduk tilts his head and frowns slightly. Something's off. Like building the world's most beautiful palace, only to realize there's no one to sweep the floors. He turns to the gods. I need caretakers, he says, workers, beings who can till the earth, bake bread, clean shrines, keep count of sacrifices, and preferably not file complaints to HR every 2 seconds. Naturally, the other gods recoil. Them do physical labor with those robes. Here's your historical fact for tonight. This moment reflects the ancient Mesopotamian worldview. Human beings were not created for personal fulfillment or divine companionship. They were created to do the gods' chores, farming, building, praying. Those weren't sacred acts out of love. They were obligations, cosmic job descriptions. Marduk considers his options, and that's when the idea strikes. He looks at Kingu, yes, that Kingu, the sullen, mopey, ex-boyfriend come general, who held the tablet of destinies for about 5 minutes before fumbling the bag. Kingu is still shackled, caught in the magic that bound him during the battle. Marduk eyes him and says, perfect. Even from your floating dream space you wince. He calls upon the gods. We'll use Kingu's blood, he declares. Mix it with clay from the earth. Shape it. Mold it. Breathe into it. And so begins the messiest arts and crafts session in cosmic history. Ea, remember him, the clever one, steps in to do the actual magical mixing. Blood, clay, divine breath, a few muttered spells, and from the swirling slurry the first human takes shape. Here's a fringe theory scholars love to whisper about. Some believe humans were made from Kingu's blood, not as punishment for him, but as punishment for us. That humans were born from rebellion, made not of stardust but guilt. You lean in closer, watching the first human blink awake, mud still drying in their hair, ribcage rising with that first borrowed breath. And what do? They sneeze. Probably the most honest moment in mythological history. Marduk nods. They'll do, he says. And thus from a disgraced god and a handful of dirt, humanity is born, not to rule, to serve. You watch now as the first humans stumble into being half mud, half divine error, blinking at the sun that was hung before they were even imagined. They are small, soft, confused, but alive. And Marduk, standing above them with arms crossed and eyebrows raised, seems almost pleased. Almost. Humans weren't made for poetry, or glory, or even curiosity. They were made to help. So what do the gods do with their new workforce? They assign them chores. Immediately, build temples, burn incense, bake bread for the shrines. And don't forget the animal sacrifices, although, in a surprise twist, it turns out no one actually explained that part to the sheep. The humans are told to plough to harvest, to offer prayers on schedule like employees, clocking in under starlight. Your historical moment for tonight. Ancient Babylonian temple records, yes, we have them, show detailed logs of offerings, labor assignments, and grain rations. It's myth turned bureaucracy. The gods weren't abstract ideals, they were managers, their temples, functioning economies. Back in the myth, you follow one of the early humans, as they try to figure out the whole existence thing. Their first real achievement, inventing mud pies. Their second, dropping one on their own foot and inventing the concept of regret. You hover close as they look up at the towering ziggurat being built brick by brick. They don't understand its purpose, only that the gods demand it, and that if they stop building, the rivers will flood again. Or worse, taxes. Meanwhile, the gods relax. With the chores handled, they throw feasts, sip divine wine, and compose hymns about how amazing it is to not shovel cosmic stardust anymore. One god, Nusku, if you must know, even invents a golden reclining couch. Very ergonomic. Probably bad for your posture, though. Still not everyone's sold on the arrangement. Some of the elder gods grumble. They whisper that these humans are fragile, annoying, and possibly too clever. One of them made a joke about the moon looking like a cracked egg. And it's stuck. And Marduk. He listens to the murmurs but says nothing. Instead, he walks among the humans in dreams, quietly, testing them, watching to see if they'll pray without being prompted, if they'll offer without fear, if maybe there's more to them than utility. Here's a quirky detail from a fringe theory. Some scholars believe early humans were originally immortal, but their closeness to divine knowledge was revoked after they started asking too many questions like, why do the gods need temples if they can make stars? You drift along as the humans begin to sing, not beautifully, not in harmony, but together. They're not just surviving, they're remembering something buried in their blood. Maybe a whisper of Kingu, maybe a flicker of Tiamat. And in the stars above, Marduk feels it too. You find yourself now between dream and dust, walking beside the first humans as they muddle through this brave new world one sunrise at a time. Their hands blister from stonework, their backs ache from ploughing fields that only half understand the seasons, but still they rise, they build, they breathe, and they wonder. You can hear them murmuring questions beside sacred fires. Who made us? Why are the stars in lines? What happens when we die? The gods hear these questions too, but mostly pretend they're bad background noise. After all, curiosity isn't listed anywhere on their divine task charts. Meanwhile, the temples rise higher. Great ziggurats of mud, brick, and prayer take shape beneath the sky, Marduk stitched together from the carcass of a sea dragon. Priests begin organizing rituals. Offerings are recorded on clay tablets with neat little wedges. One priest even invents tithing, an ancient Babylonian version of "Don't forget to give us 10% of your barley or else." Your historical bite for tonight. Real Babylonian temples were not just religious centers, they were economic hubs. They controlled land, labor, trade routes, and sometimes even lent silver like sleepy-eyed proto-banks. Being close to a god, it turns out, had excellent return on investment. But you feel a shift, subtle but growing. Some humans aren't satisfied. You trail behind a young brickmaker who watches the priest chant praises to Marduk and thinks, why does he get the wine? Another scratches lines in the dirt trying to mimic the stars. A third carves a strange little idol, one that doesn't look like any god they've seen. It's not rebellion yet, it's memory. Something old, older than even Marduk's sky. A whisper under the clay. A pulse in the dust. Could it be Tiamat? Historians still argue over this. Did the myth of Tiamat truly die with her body, or did traces of her linger in the people born from her killer's design? Some point to goddess cults that never quite went away. Others note how sea imagery kept bubbling up in unexpected places. Back in the heavens, Marduk notices. He leans closer to the earth, not angry, just interested. And here's a fringe tidbit whispered by esoteric scholars. A rare tablet fragment hints that Marduk once descended to the edge of a river in disguise and asked a human shepherd, "What is the name of your mother's mother's mother?" The shepherd answered, "The water." Marduk said nothing. He just watched the stars blink. And so do you now, because above all this prayer and ploughing and half-buried myth, the sky is changing. Quietly, patiently, something old stirs. You drift above the world now, watching time pass like mist over riverbanks. The humans multiply. Villages bloom around temple walls. Songs grow more complex tools, more clever. They shape the world with bare hands and borrowed dreams. But always in the cracks of their rituals, stories begin to leak. They whisper them while kneading bread, while sharpening hoes, while lying on rooftops under Tiamat's star-scattered belly. Not the official stories from the ziggurat priests. Those are stiff as sun-baked clay. These are softer, older, half-remembered. They speak of a great mother who once held all things in her belly, who sang creation, not commanded it, who became the world not in defeat but in sacrifice. And you know exactly who they're talking about. Tiamat. Marduk hears it too. He watches from his throne in the heavens, built by the way from polished meteorite and smugness, and frowns, not furiously, not yet, but with the cold squint of a god who thought the story was over. You see, humans have done the most rebellious thing of all they've started remembering. Here's your historical side note for tonight. Even in later periods of Babylonian religion, traces of older goddess worship persisted. Tiamat was never openly revered again, but she seemed to haunt things lurking in lullabies, water rituals, even in the dragon motifs etched into palace walls. Back on earth, a scribe etches a poem into clay, referencing the mother's breath still rising from the sea.
He doesn't sign his name, he doesn't show the priest, he just buries it. And meanwhile the gods argue. Marduk summons his circle and says, "There is unrest, reverence is leaking sideways." The others shuffle nervously. They were just getting used to the whole no more chores thing. Some suggest rewriting the myths. Others propose sending prophetic dreams to particularly nosy humans. One panics and recommends turning everyone into fish. He's ignored. Here's a fun detail. According to one rare interpretation, the Tablet of Destinies could alter perception itself, rewrite belief like a divine press release, but no one dares use it now. It's sealed, hidden, guarded. So Marduk, for the first time since the duel, waits. He does not descend, he does not speak, he watches. Because beneath all the rituals and tribute and temple songs, there's a low hum building in the hearts of humans.
You feel it too, vibrating through the ground like a forgotten melody, tuning itself back into being. Something ancient, something feminine, something unfinished. You glide now above a land baked in sun and salted with memory. The humans till their fields tend their shrines, chant the names of gods carved into stone, but something stirs behind their eyes. In their quiet moments between prayers to Marduk and offerings to the official pantheon, they dream of the sea. Not the literal sea, the other one, the sea inside them. In back alleys and orchard shadows, they speak of a power before power. Not in anger, not in defiance, just longing for the warmth of a womb that once held everything. You follow a potter who, while spinning clay into urns, hums a wordless tune passed down from her grandmother's grandmother. The priests say the melody is meaningless. She says nothing and keeps spinning. The clay listens. Up above, the gods are uneasy, especially Marduk. He's noticed something peculiar. The wind no longer obeys quite as quickly. The stars wobble just slightly from their appointed places. It's not chaos, it's drift. As if Tiamat's memory, embedded in the very structure of reality, has begun to remember itself. Your historical gem for tonight. In some Babylonian texts, the Tablet of Destinies is not just a record of fate, it's said to be self-updating, like the universe's operating system rewriting itself in the background. Some tablets even hint that the owner of the tablet isn't fully in control, just the editor-in-chief of a story still being written. And guess who's reading the margins? Kingu. Yes, Kingu. His name is whispered again by humans who feel tired. Tired of rules, tired of taxes, tired of bowing to gods who outsource their labor. In the myths, he's portrayed as a traitor, a fool, a failure. But is the twist some humans begin to see him differently, as a sacrifice, a scapegoat, the one whose blood gave them life? A fringe theory from later Akkadian folklore suggests secret Kingu cults may have existed in isolated villages where initiates painted their faces with red clay and recited poems not to gods, but to the losers of heaven's war. You drift among these people, listening to fragments. He fell so we could rise. She was torn so we could breathe. The sea dreams in our blood. And now even the tablet pulses faintly in its chamber. Marduk feels it. A ripple he can't trace, a question he can't quite hear. Is it possible, he wonders, that killing Tiamat didn't end her, that turning her into sky and stone only scattered her voice? You watch his hands clench, then relax, because even gods can feel it now. The story isn't done. And sometimes the monster gets the last word. Now the winds shift. You can feel it, not a storm, not rebellion, but something gentler, stranger. A recollection riding the breeze, like perfume from a forgotten garden. The humans are dreaming louder, and the dreams are wet. They no longer speak Tiamat's name with fear. They don't even whisper it anymore. They sing it quietly while drawing water from wells, while smoothing linens, while gazing at the moon's reflection in a bucket. It's not worship, it's remembering. Marduk hears it. Oh, he hears everything. He calls another council of the gods, but this time it's quieter. No shouting, no lightning fingers or dramatic sky gestures, just heavy robes, heavy thoughts, and eyes cast downward. The world is slipping, Marduk says. The humans recall the past, the old past. Nabu, god of scribes, pipes up. They're making up new myths, my lord, ones where you don't slay the dragon, you marry her. Gasps all around. You chuckle, floating just overhead. Because humans are rewriting the narrative. In some stories, Tiamat doesn't rage. She weeps, mourns, becomes the ocean willingly. In others, she offers her body to Marduk in union, not war. In a particularly strange version etched into the corner of a shepherd's staff, she saves Marduk from drowning in his own arrogance. Here's your historical kernel for tonight. In the ancient world, myths were fluid, literally. They passed from tongue to tongue, like river water changing shape to fit the vessel. Local cults, oral traditions, foreign invasions all restructured the divine narrative. What was once monstrous could become maternal. What was once heroism could become hubris. And in the silence after the council, Marduk thinks. He walks alone through the stars, hands clasped behind his back, looking down not in anger but in contemplation. You feel something flicker behind his expression. Could it be regret? There's a fringe interpretation whispered among modern mythologists that Marduk was never meant to kill Tiamat, that the original myth, long lost, wasn't about conquest at all. It was about balance. The divine masculine and feminine co-ruling the world. Order not imposed, but negotiated. And now, as humans dream and retell, that lost version begins to shimmer back into existence. A child carves an image into soft clay, a coiled dragon not dead, but sleeping, a goddess of deep peace, not rage. In her coils she holds stars. Above her a smaller figure, not slayer, but son or consort, or both. You drift through this dream and realize the shape of the world is changing, not in thunder, in story. You float now through a world rewritten not with war or fire, but with myth in bloom. In quiet corners of Babylon, the priests still chant Marduk's victories. They recite the official lines carved into temple stone, where Tiamat is a dragon of chaos and Marduk the divine savior. Incense curls, choirs echo, tablets are copied with reverent hands. But outside the temple walls, oh, that's where the real magic's happening. Farmers shape fertility charms that look suspiciously serpentine. Fishermen leave tiny cakes at the river's edge, not for Marduk, but for the old mother who watches the tide. And children huddled beneath woven blankets whisper bedtime tales of the sea queen who dreams in salt. None of it is sanctioned, and none of it can be stopped. Here's your historical gem tonight. In the twilight years of Babylon, foreign influences, Persian, Assyrian, Hellenistic, began to merge with native myth. Stories bent, braided, broken were reborn. Tiamat didn't disappear. She migrated into other names, other shapes. She slipped through cultural cracks like floodwater under a temple door. Some say she became Leviathan in Hebrew lore. Others link her to the Greek thalassa or the serpentine dragons in Near Eastern carvings. The form changes, the fear doesn't. But here's the twist. Humans stop fearing her. They embrace her. One midwife wears a necklace carved from coral shaped like coiled waves. She says it helps babies breathe. A sailor tells tales of a sleeping goddess beneath the sea who listens to his prayers when storms grow teeth. A weaver sings songs about how all land was once the belly of a loving sea. You notice even the animals respond. Dogs howl at the tides more often. Birds circle rivers with strange rhythm. A goat gives birth facing west, and the farmer swears it's a sign. Marduk from his high throne does not intervene. He watches. And perhaps he finally understands what the humans have known all along. The world wasn't saved by slaying the monster. It was born from her. Here's a little fringe thought from a rogue cylinder seal. Found near Uruk, it shows Marduk and Tiamat sitting side by side, not in battle but in council. A serpent coiled between them, an open book before them both. Perhaps that's the ending humans are shaping now, not one of conquest, but of conversation. You drift now through a twilight world, neither holy Marduks nor holy Tiamats. A realm balanced on memory and myth, humming softly with contradiction. The sun still rises at Marduk's appointed hour, the stars still circle with the precision of divine geometry. But in the dreams of the people, something else flows. The sea. Not the literal one crashing on far-off shores, but the deeper one, the first sea. The sea inside bones behind eyes, beneath the dust of every city ever built. The sea that remembers. Even the gods seem quieter now. Nabu, god of scribes, sharpens his reed pen but hesitates before inscribing the next line. Is it Marduk, slayer of chaos, or Marduk, son of the sea? In one temple, a priest stumbles mid-hymn, catching himself just before singing Tiamat's name instead of the one etched into the wall. It's subtle, subversive, sacred. Here's your historical reflection. Myths weren't just told they were lived, they bled into civic law, daily rituals architecture, even weather predictions. So when a story shifts, everything can shift with it, which is exactly what's happening now. On Earth, a potter sculpts a pair of figures into the curve of a ceremonial vase. One wears Marduk's feathered crown, the other a woman made of waves, not writhing in battle but standing beside him. In the north, a priestess opens her morning prayers with a riddle. Who is the mother of stars and stones? No one answers out loud, but the silence rings with salt. Meanwhile, in the heavens, Marduk visits the sealed chamber where the tablet of destinies rests. It hums now. Softly, he places a hand on it. Does he remember that moment standing before Tiamat, the wind caught in her throat, the blade poised over a story that could have ended differently? Some say the tablet flickered then, that it still does, because the fate it writes is living updated by belief, fed by dreams, changed not by war, but by story. And here's your fringe theory for the night. A few broken tablets so old they crumble, when breathed on, depict a third act to the Marduk-Tiamat myth. One where she awakens not in rage, but in understanding, where the sea does not drown the land, and the sky bows not in submission but in reunion. You listen now as the wind over the earth carries a lullaby, no language, just rhythm, the heartbeat of a world that was once a monster, now a memory, now a mother. And you are floating in her, still, always. You drift over the land now as dusk unfurls its blue shadows across fields and rooftops. The temples still glow with oil lamps, priests still read from sacred tablets, but their voices are quieter these days, as though even the gods are listening for something else. Something beneath the story. You pass a grandmother kneeling in the dirt planting barley. Before she presses each seed into the soil, she kisses it and murmurs, "Back to the belly, back to the breath." Not a line from any official hymn, but it feels older than all of them. The story of Tiamat has woven itself into the folds of daily life, not declared, not decreed, but diffused like mist through morning fields. It's not rebellion, it's remembrance. It lives in rhythms, tides, birth pangs, heartbeat drums, the shape of a child's question when she asks why the ocean sighs at night. Even the rivers seem to carry it. The Tigris and Euphrates, once thought to flow from Tiamat's eyes, shimmer just a bit differently now. Farmers whisper that the floods no longer come in rage, but in sorrow, as if the waters remember what they once were. Here's your historical note for tonight. Many Mesopotamian cities developed elaborate flood calendars attributing rising waters to divine moods. While Marduk got the credit in the state-sanctioned version, older tablets suggest the river's soul was always feminine, always her. Meanwhile, Marduk gazes from his throne. He's no tyrant. He's not blind.
He sees the humans building temples to him while dreaming of someone else, and he doesn't strike them down. He watches. A strange thing happens next. Marduk begins commissioning statues not of himself, but of the sea. Not monstrous, not slain, just vast, quiet, eyes closed, the gods notice. Nabu, curious as ever, asks, "Is this a tribute?" Marduk replies, "No, it's a memory." And here's the quirky fringe whisper from late-period temple graffiti scratched into the back wall of a market shrine. The god who ruled the sky bowed once to the tide. It's not signed, but it's etched deeply. Back on Earth, a child plays beside a stream, forming shapes in the mud. She fashions a little figure with wide eyes, spiral hair, and long coiled limbs. She sets it gently in the water and watches it drift. She smiles. So do you, because you know, the monster was never the end. She was always the beginning.
You hover now between starlight and soil, feeling the story vibrate in every grain of earth. It has passed from lips to ears, from ritual to rumor, from battle cry to bedtime murmur. The myth has changed, not broken but reshaped, not erased but retold. And beneath it all historians dig. Yes, real ones, with brushes, boots, and sunburned noses, sifting through the ruins of cities that once pulsed with temple hymns. Babylon Nippur Uruk, names from stone and syllable. The archaeologists kneel in ancient streets, brushing away dust, to reveal clay tablets that haven't seen light in 4,000 years. They find fragments. One broken edge says, Tiamat of the deep. The rest is gone, worn down by time, by weather, by 1,000 sandstorms that don't care for archives. Still the scholars lean in. They translate, they argue, they write papers with titles like Reconsidering the Role of Tiamat in the Enuma Elish Matriarch or Monster. Some say she was always symbolic. Others claim she was a literal entity, maybe a meteor, maybe an earthquake, maybe the echo of an even older goddess, swallowed by patriarchy and paperwork. You smile, because they'll never fully agree, and that's okay. Here's your historical footnote for tonight. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, was copied and recopied by scribes for centuries, stored in temple libraries like the great one at Nineveh. It wasn't just a tale, it was a cosmic constitution, a story that justified rule, ritual, and the rhythm of daily life. But stories, like rivers, always find new paths. You follow a scholar in the British Museum standing quietly in front of a tablet the size of a dinner plate. She stares at the cuneiform etched into the clay, tiny wedges pressing toward eternity. Her eyes mist. Not from discovery, from recognition. I think she loved them, she whispers more to herself than to anyone else. Even when they killed her. That line won't make it into the journal article. But it will be remembered. And down in the villages reborn over the bones of old temples, children build sand castles shaped like coiled dragons. They stomp on them laughing, then rebuild them gentler, softer. They're not afraid of monsters. They're afraid of forgetting. And you, drifting above this dance of time, realize something profound. Tiamat is not gone. She's not sleeping. She's studied, sung, etched in tattoos, whispered to by archaeologists who think they're dreaming. Even Marduk can feel her name rising again, not in opposition, but in chorus. You drift through moonlight now, weaving between temples long abandoned and ziggurats sunk into the silence of time. Yet even in their ruin the stones seem to remember. They hum gently with stories no longer chanted aloud but still alive beneath layers of dust and wind. A new kind of worship has taken root. Not in gold offerings or sacrificial flame, but in retelling. You find a group of storytellers gathered by a fire in a shepherd's courtyard. Children lean in wide-eyed while an old man, robes patched and voice cracked, tells a version of the myth unlike any carved in clay. He says, Tiamat was not rage, she was remedy, that the monsters she birthed were not soldiers but sorrows, creatures born of grief, not vengeance. Every claw, he says, was a memory too sharp to keep inside. The children gasp when he says Marduk met her, not to kill her, but to understand. In this version, they battle not with weapons but with questions, and no one wins. They choose to share the world. Up above, stars blink in time with the flames, and you realize the myth has returned to its wild state. Fluid, playful, endless. It is no longer a fixed tale on a clay tablet. It is a living song shaped by every voice that dares to sing it differently. Here's your historical whisper. Some late Akkadian texts suggest myths were used in healing rituals. Priests would recite creation stories beside the ill-believing that speaking order into the air could coax a body back into balance. Story as medicine. And now Tiamat's story is medicine. You drift into a dream of a dream where even Marduk listens at the edge of a mortal child's mind. He no longer insists on being king, he just listens. For once the God who ordered everything makes room for the chaos he tried to end. And perhaps deep down he remembers the moment before he struck the final blow. When Tiamat looked at him not with fury, but with an ocean's quiet resignation. You don't have to win, she might have said. You just have to choose differently. In a distant future, long after temples fall and empires forget their own names, a writer will sit alone tapping keys under a flickering lamp. They'll type the word Tiamat and pause, unsure of where the story is going. But they'll smile, because now the monster writes back. Now you float at the far edge of memory, where stories become echoes and echoes become breath. You drift over ruins no longer named through winds that once carried hymns and now stir only leaves. But the myth still alive. In a dusty village on the river's curve, a child sketches a shape into the earth with a stick spiral wave eye star. She doesn't know the names, she doesn't need to. The shape is older than language, the motion is the memory. She hums as she draws a tune passed down from no one in particular, yet somehow belonging to everyone. You follow her home, where a grandmother tells tales that don't match the tablets. In hers, Tiamat is not slain, but becomes the sea by choice, retreating not defeated, but generous. A goddess who saw the future and chose to cradle it. And in these quiet moments you feel the truth, pulsing beneath history's polished floorboards. Tiamat was never the villain. She was the first sacrifice. Here's your historical insight. For tonight, many ancient myths begin with a cosmic dismemberment, the world carved from a body. In Norse tales, it's Ymir. In Hindu cosmology, it's Purusha. In Babylon, it's Tiamat. But what if across cultures, these aren't deaths, but offerings? Maybe the divine feminine wasn't destroyed. She offered herself so that the world could bloom. And now, in the temple of your own thoughts, Marduk stands again, not with sword raised, but with hands open. He no longer denies what was lost. He recognizes it, honors it. He walks the edge of the sea at night where waves sigh like a sleeping beast. He leaves no footprints, just silence, and a single stone placed gently at the tide line. Perhaps it's an apology, perhaps it's a prayer. Even in heaven the gods feel the shift. No throne cracks, no stars fall. But something deep within the fabric of order softens, as if even fate itself is willing to be rewritten. You pass over a desert road where travelers sleep by a dying fire. One of them mutters Tiamat's name in their sleep, not in fear, in thanks. And somewhere, in the hidden deep, far beyond maps and theology, something vast and ancient smiles. She was never gone, only waiting. The world turns slower now, or maybe you've simply grown still enough to notice its rhythm. You hover above the quiet hush of pre-dawn where human breath fogs the air and stories cling to the last scraps of dream. Temples have crumbled, languages have faded, but the story remains. You drift over a field where no god is worshipped, no hymns are sung, just rows of crops waking under mist. And yet, you feel her. In the soil, in the dew, in the hush between heartbeats, Tiamat. Not as a name, but as a presence. She no longer needs temples, she is the temple, and Marduk, he no longer watches from on high. He walks the long road now with no retinue, no crown. Sometimes he pauses at rivers and listens, not for tribute, for remembrance. Some say he still speaks to the stars, but more often he speaks to humans in dreams, in wind-blown dust, in those odd feelings you get when you look at the ocean and feel like it's staring back. You float beside a young scribe, copying a tale onto fresh clay, not the official version, but one stitched together from fragments, dreams, and rebellion. He's smiling. He knows it's not the correct version. He doesn't care, because the monster in his version is not slain. She sings. The gods still argue, sure, old habits die hard, but now they do it with less thunder and more curiosity. Some even wonder aloud, what if we told the story differently? What if the beginning wasn't a war, but a conversation we misunderstood? Historians still argue, that's what they do, but more and more they whisper the same strange thing. Maybe the myth was never about defeating chaos. Maybe it was about understanding where it came from. And you are part of it now. You've walked the spiral. You've stood between God and monster myth and memory. You've seen the world split and sewn again with story. And as the stars dim and dawn stretches her fingers across the edge of the sky, you rest gently in the truth that some monsters are mothers, some gods are wrong, and some endings are simply new beginnings told in a softer voice. And now let your breath settle like silt drifting through calm water. Let the images dissolve, the great dragon folding into waves, the storm god lowering his sword, the stars above leaning just a little closer to listen. The tale of Tiamat and Marduk doesn't need to end with thunder or triumph. Tonight it ends with stillness, with the sound of a tide slipping across memory, washing over the footprints of war and leaving behind the soft hush of renewal. You've travelled far, friend, through sea and sky, myth and meaning. You've seen a monster become a mountain, a warrior become a witness, a myth become a mirror. Let that story settle in your chest like warm embers. Let it glow there, not to burn, but to comfort. In the world outside this story, there are still battles, still misunderstandings, still those who fear the sea because they do not yet know it was once their mother. But here in this quiet moment you are safe. You are floating. You are whole. The gods have fallen asleep. The monsters have curled into dreams. And the stars, those bright-eyed archivists of all things forgotten, smile down on you. So breathe, gently now. The story is held. The water is calm. And the night, like the old goddess herself, is not your enemy. It's your cradle. End of script. Sweet dreams.